Hello friends, Robin here from Cheese From Scratch, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to pick a cheese form for the type of cheese that you are planning on making. Now, if you go onto the Cheese Supply website, you're going to see that there is a lot of different cheese form options. So these forms will be called forms or molds or hoops. Those are all different names for just a place for your cheese to actually become the shape that it is going to become. Just as an example here, got this little wheel of cheese that was made in this cheese form. So it looks just like that, has just been pressed down. Now, the type of form that you're going to pick kind of depends on the type of cheese that you're going to make. So I've kind of got these forms here that I've got in front of me separated into two different categories. These forms over here are ones that are for pressed cheeses, and these ones over here are for cheeses that are usually called soft cheeses, or cheeses that are going to be pressed with their own weight. So they're not going to have any sort of pressure applied on top of them. So first off, we'll start with soft cheese forms. So examples of soft cheeses that you might be making at home would be maybe brie, feta. I can't think of any other ones right now, but there is a ton of soft cheeses out there. And these are cheeses that are just going to be pressed with their own weight. You're not going to be applying any pressure on top of them. So these cheese forms are often called baskets. So this would be a basket example of a form. They could be called forms, they could be called molds. So these cheese forms come in a lot of different sizes. You can even have ones that are different shapes and stuff. These cheese forms, you just need a few. So I have a lot of different options here. So typically a soft cheese recipe will need several different forms. For example, my brie recipe that is in my upcoming physical cheese making book, Cheese From Scratch, Natural Cheese Making From Home. I will link that down below. In that recipe, you're going to be making at least several types of bries depending on the size of them. So you're going to want to have multiple different soft cheese forms. Soft cheese forms can also be kind of DIY'd at home. So for example, this is a yogurt container form, and so it just has holes poked into the sides of the yogurt container. So you can definitely just kind of DIY this. Salad spinner inserts, they work pretty good for DIYing for soft cheese forms because they kind of look like these baskets, but they're also really inexpensive. So like these ones came from Amazon in a 3-pack and it was like $10. So if you don't want to like fiddle around trying to get holes and everything poked in it, you can just get some inexpensive ones. As I said, they come in lots of different sizes. Some of them have sort of more of a basket look, and this is going to be better for really moist type cheeses. The drainage is going to be a little bit more even, but I make all of my soft cheeses in a variety of these different forms. These ones with just the holes are going to be a little bit, they're going to drain a little bit slower, but as long as you flip them a couple times during the draining process, it's not going to be a problem at all. I also have different types of material. So I have these clay forms that I had somebody locally make for me, and these ones are really awesome as well. If you are having somebody locally make some clay forms for you, my biggest recommendation is to make sure that you don't make the holes too big. Like this one, for example, the holes are a little bit too big, and so the cheese sort of falls out a little bit of the holes. It's not a big deal. I call these little cheeses that come out of this form hedgehog cheeses because they look like little hedgehogs when you pull them out. They've got little bumps all over them, but when you put those cheeses onto the drying rack, those bumps just fall off, and it's not a big deal at all. Another big consideration when choosing a soft cheese form is making sure you choose one that is tall enough. Just as an example, this brie was made in this cheese form, and you can see that it reduced down a lot. So if I had a thinner cheese form, if it was only like that big, say, I would have a really, really thin cheese. So making sure that you're choosing one that is tall enough, and taller is better because then you can use it for more types of cheese. Even if you're making something, say like a feta, that isn't going to reduce down as much as this, you still can just like fill the form a little bit less full. So I recommend going taller, and then you can make a more variety of cheeses. This one and this one actually, for example, they make pretty thin cheeses. I use these ones for brie quite often, and they do make quite a thin brie, but how I kind of curb that so that it's not too thin is I make sure I pile the curds really high on top of these cheese forms. And if you have ever made soft cheeses before, they just reduce down really, really quickly. So you can even keep some cheese curds in your cheese pot under the warm way, and you can add them on for like the first hour. Just keep adding cheese curds on, and this is going to keep it from becoming too flat of a cheese if you just do have those kind of tinier models of cheese. So you can buy cheese forms at any cheese supply store. There's also quite a few varieties on Amazon, so you can check that out as well. But yeah, those are for soft cheese forms. Now for pressed cheese forms, there is also a variety of different sizes. So typically with cheese making, and this depends very much on your milk, on the type of cheese that you're making, on your technique that you're using to make your cheese, but typically you can say that you're going to get about 1 pound of cheese per gallon of milk used. So for example, this is a very loose guideline, but if you are going to make a 4-pound block of cheese, you are going to, if you are going to make a 4-gallon batch of cheese, you're going to get about a 4-pound block of cheese, but it's probably going to range in about 3 pounds. So that is a loose rule for when you are choosing a size for your cheese form. So you kind of want to look at how much milk you're going to be using for your cheese making. So for example, if you are planning on always making 4-gallon batches of cheese, you want to be looking for about a 3 to 4 pound cheese form. And so when you go onto the cheese supply website, they're going to tell you beside the cheese forms what size of cheese form that is. If you're in Canada, it would be in kilograms, so you'd be looking for that kind of 1.5 to 2 kilograms cheese form if you're planning on doing, that might be bad math. Yeah, 1.5 kilogram cheese form if you're planning on doing a 4-gallon batch of cheese. So this one right here, I believe it is a 2 kilogram cheese form, and so I use this one for a variety of different sizes of cheeses, but I mostly use it for like my 6-gallon batches or my 4-gallon batches, and it works good. It will just make a little bit of a thinner cheese if I'm doing a 4-gallon batch. For example, this cheese right here, you can see, this is, I think it's a red pepper flaked Colby. So this one would have been made in this cheese form. And so I would have filled it right to the top. I think this would have been a 6-gallon batch, and it reduced down just a little bit, about 1 inch. So again, you want to make sure that it's tall enough that you're not going to be reducing your cheeses down too much, yeah, you don't want to be making a pancake cheese is the moral of the story. So for example, this one is a Colby, and it was made in this cheese form. Oops, I wonder if I can stuff it in there. No, okay. So it reduced down about a 1/2 inch as well. So just making sure that your cheese forms are tall enough that you're not making this super wide cheese that is really flat, because that's going to be kind of adverse for aging. For example, this cheese form right here is a huge guy. I don't know how big this is, but I typically make, if I am doing a 10-gallon batch of cheese, because sometimes that happens when you're newly freshened in milk, I will make a very big batch of cheese. For example, this Gouda was made in the summertime when my cows were freshened and just first in lactation. I don't think I filled this one all the way up because it was too many curds, but it still, didn't make a pancake cheese. So I'm pretty cognizant if I'm going to be using this big boy that I'm having enough curds to not make it reduce down too much. Typically with a pressed cheese, sometimes they're barely going to press down at all, but you're usually going to get about 1 inch of pressure down. So the biggest thing when choosing a pressed cheese form is making sure you choose one that has a follower. Sometimes you have to buy the follower separately, but I really, really, really recommend making sure that you have a follower for your cheese form. You can kind of look around your house and DIY it, trying to find something that's going to fit in there that's going to press down, but I spent a lot of time early on in my cheese making trying to figure out something that would just fit into my DIY cheese forms, and in the end this cost like $10, so why didn't I just buy this and save myself a headache? I'm very pro make do with what you have, but I do recommend you buy a cheese form because it's going to save you a lot of headaches. So the purpose of the follower is just so that your weight from whatever type of press that you're using, I will link down below. I have 2 pressing videos, or actually two pressing videos, one on how to choose a cheese press and one on how to DIY a bucket press. So you just need 5-gallon buckets to make yourself a nice little handy cheese press, but you need that follower to have the pressure go on top of it and push down on your cheese. So really important to have that follower is the moral of the story. So picking one that is the right size, picking one that is not going to be too short or too wide so that you don't end up with a pancake cheese, and picking one with a follower are kind of my main takeaways from choosing a pressed cheese form. Pressed cheese forms will come in different materials as well. Usually they are something sturdy like plastic, or sometimes I think you can get like stainless steel ones. I have some that they're not like fiberglass, but they're like they might be fiberglass. I don't know what they are. They're like a hoop. I lent them to someone else right now. And they don't even have a bottom on them. So they're just like basically like a piece of PVC pipe. That's what they look like. And because with pressed cheese forms, you're always using a cheesecloth in them. So you can have a form that is just a PVC pipe, basically. It doesn't even have to have holes in the side. It can just have no bottom on it, and that's just going to hold your cheese into the shape while it gets pressed down. Most of the cheese forms that are affordable that you're going to come across, though, are just going to be plastic. Some of the ones that are a little bit more expensive are going to be this really kind of thick type of plastic. It is plastic, but it's just a really thick version of it. It doesn't really matter which type you choose, just making sure that it has that follower in it is really important. You can use pressed cheese forms as soft cheese forms as well. For example, the difference between, say, this one and this one, this one and this one aren't really that much at all. So I often make bries in this one, or soft cheeses that just are going to press with their own weight. If I'm going to make a really big style brie, I'll make it in this one. So you can use pressed cheese forms for soft cheeses, but you can't use soft cheese forms for pressed cheeses. Or I guess you could, but you would need a follower, and it would probably make a fairly tiny cheese. As I mentioned, you're always going to need to have a cheesecloth in these pressed cheese forms, whereas with the soft cheese forms, you're not going to use a cheesecloth. The cheese is going to be put directly into these cheese forms, and they're just going to drain. You're going to flip them several times throughout that draining to facilitate even drainage, but you're not going to have a cheesecloth in them. There is several types of cheese forms that actually have like a mesh sort of cheesecloth in them. Those ones are typically quite expensive. I haven't seen many of them used in the home setting, and I do see a lot of cheese forms because people send me pictures of their cheese forms over on Instagram as a cheese educator. So I haven't really seen many of those types of cheese forms. So usually you're just going to be having ones that are kind of naked and not having any sort of cheesecloth inside them. Cheese forms will also come in different shapes. For example, you can see that this one is a little bit more rounded, and this is going to create that sort of Gouda, typical Gouda style cheese. For example, this cheese, before I cut it in half, it was kind of, that rounded edged Gouda cheese. Now, there's nothing that says that a Gouda has to have rounded edges. I kind of think, because Gouda is a little bit more of a moister pressed cheese, I assume that traditionally, and this could just be totally out the window, not true, but I assume that traditionally the cheese forms probably sort of look like this, but because those cheeses were a little bit moister when they were pulled out of the cheese forms and thrown on the rack, they probably collapsed a little bit on the side, and so that gave them that typical kind of rounded edge, and then we started just mimicking it in the cheese forms that we were using. So that's my guess on that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of seems like a good guess. Anyways, so there's nothing that says that a cheese has to be one shape or another. If I am naturally aging cheeses, I really try not to make them square. And just because round wheels, they don't have any really edges that stick out. And so you're not going to have those edges dry out. If you were going to try to naturally age a square cheese, and what naturally age means is it's not going in a vacuum pack, it's actually going into a little Tupperware container, it's going to be put into your cheese cave, and the humidity is going to be controlled while it kind of forms its own rind. So when you're naturally aging cheeses, you don't want to have any kind of edges because those are going to get drier than the inside of your cheese. It's not really a big deal at all, but it's just going to help you make a better cheese if it's round. So round cheese, I feel like has evolved to be a thing because it is just helpful when you are aging cheese. So that is the end of my choosing a cheese form video. If you guys have any questions, pop them down in the comments below. Check out that link for the pre-sales of my new physical cheese making book, Cheese from Scratch, Natural Cheese Making from Home. I published through a publishing company called Homestead Living that has so many other amazing books all about homesteading and all sorts of different topics on the topic of homestead living. So make sure you check out their other books as well when you are there checking out my book for pre-order. And if you haven't already, press like and subscribe. I post a new video on cheese making, milk cows, and dairy processing every Monday, and I would love to have you guys come back and have a look. Okay, bye guys!